Good afternoon, and welcome to Health AI Builders and CHIL Unconference here at UC Berkeley. My name is Vicky Bikia, and I'm an AI researcher at Stanford University, and I'm also the chair of this year's Unconference. I'm really excited to see this room come together. This is a highly curated group of people, including incredible speakers, roundtable experts, and all of you. Every single person in this room was intentionally included because you're building, researching, or supporting something meaningful in health AI. And this gathering is small on purpose. We really encourage small, real conversation, challenge each other, and hopefully you can walk out of this room in the end of the day with some new ideas, collaborations, and questions worth asking. So behind this meeting is ALI, the Association for Health Learning and Inference. And ALI is a growing community of scientists, clinicians, engineers, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders that aim to advance machine learning and AI for better health. And this event, this conference, is part of the broader CHIL conference, the conference on learning, inference and learning, which runs here at Berkeley through Friday. And while CHIL brings together some of the best technical and clinical work in the space, with this conference we aim to shift gears and focus on building, scaling, and implementing. So this conference came of the need to address something that we keep hearing about, that there is often a gap between traditional academic events and the conversations that take place behind the scenes about how we build teams, how we navigate regulation, how we landing our first pilot study, how we don't get things figured out. So we created this space. And we brought together a diverse group of people, including academics, founders, operators, regulatory experts, entrepreneurs, starting from early stage startups to large scale health systems and labs. And we all have in common one thing, one common drive to build smarter, safer, more human and more impactful AI tools. And here is what to expect today. So we'll start with a fireside style panel with two amazing leaders in the space. Next, we will hear a set of lightning talks that will give us some practical insights from actual builders that turn their prototypes into real products. Then we will move into our roundtable sessions. This is the most interactive part of the day. There will be two roundtable sets, each lasting 45 minutes, and I will give more details about roundtables as we go throughout the day. So we've organized the roundtables around four major themes: regulatory, commercial, fundraising, and technical development. And finally, we will gather again here to conclude with a wrap-up of the day. You might have noticed that we have handed out some colored dot stickers for your name badges. Feel free to use those. You can find them at the registration desk. You can use red if you have founded a startup already, yellow if you're thinking about founding a company or a startup, and green if you're interested in joining a startup or generally interested in the entrepreneurial space. And use them to spot each other. You never know, especially during coffee breaks and during the socials builder in the evening from 5 to 7. Before moving forward, I would like to use this time on behalf of the CHIL organization team to extend a big thank you to our sponsors, Define Ventures, Google, Silicon Valley Bank, and Stanford Healthcare, and especially I would like to thank Hong from Define for being my partner in crime in building this special event from the ground up. Also, a big thanks to Fereshteh from Google that you have the chance to meet and hear about her amazing journey throughout the day, and Raisa from SVB for supporting in general for planning this event. And a quick call to action before we start. Please lean in, speak up, be generous with what you know, honest with what you're still figuring out. Some of the best insights of the day might come not from the front of the room, but rather from the person sitting next to you. So really embrace that. And without further ado, let's start. To kick things off, we're starting with a conversation that gets right to the heart of what it means to build and scale in health AI. Joining us are two incredible founders who've been at the forefront of this space. Ron Alpha, founder of Noetic AI and former SVP at Recursion, and John Axirius Chilis, co-founder of Arteris and now Chief Data Technology Officer at Tempus. The discussion will be facilitated by Hong Trong, principal at Define Venture. In this conversation, we'll explore the entrepreneurial journey of these people, what sparked the decision to start, the highs, the lows along the way, where AI in healthcare is heading towards today, and what matters most when building and scaling a company in healthcare. Please help me welcome Ron, John, and Hong to the stage.
Hello. Oh, there we go.
Testing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this sunny, beautiful afternoon in Berkeley. I think when we started on this adventure, we were just not sure what the level of interest would be on an afternoon like this, but have been just overwhelmed with the interest here. So really excited about the quality of people in here. You all are builders and just so impressive in each one of your ways. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today. When I first started meeting with the brilliant people, Ali, to pull together this event, what we were seeing as investors in the ecosystem was just really a divide between the people who are building technologies in this space, the academics, the engineers, and then the people really adopting and trying to figure out how to use it. And so to Vicky's point, what we really hope you get from this is just like rich, real conversations about the ground truths of what it means to convert product ideas, AI into actual applications, and certainly in this world of little companies, really starting from the ground up here. So really excited to welcome John and Ron here. I thought they were a perfect pairing because they bring very complementary and also very different perspectives to the table as entrepreneurs. John started his career as a PhD at Stanford in physics, and then started a company, and now is at a publicly traded healthcare AI company. And Ron, you're just sort of in the exact opposite direction. Started at a publicly traded AI company in the space and decided to go really small. So
it wasn't publicly traded when I started.
Right. A big reason why I went publicly traded was because Ron was there, obviously. We as investors, we always say we ask our entrepreneurs to do truly impossible things, to be, both visionary and operators and focused on the day-to-day, every day, to be optimistic about what the opportunity is, despite what's happening in front of you, but at the same time, see around the corners every risk. And truly, I think, every superhero has an origin story. So John and Ron, I'd love for you to tell us about your origin stories. Tell us about, your journey, where you started, and then would love to hear about how that inspired you to end up where you are today.
How far do you want us to go back?
As far back as you're inspired to go.
Well, so I was born in LA. I guess I could start.
Yeah.
So
tell us about Recursion.
Yeah, physician scientist by training, so trained at Stanford. Fun fact about me is I went to community college in LA. So I didn't get into college after high school, and then went to community college for 3 years, and then went to undergrad for 3 years after that. So did that whole kind of path before going to Stanford and joining the MD PhD program. I ended up getting to Recursion. I had sort of a weird way of getting to Recursion. So I was in the middle of my PhD, and you're sort of in like Silicon Valley, and there's all this stuff happening, and you're sort of in the midst of PhD, like biological sciences and neuroscience PhD. And I thought, why don't I learn something about business? So I went to the Ignite program at the GSB, and it's sort of like a business school over the summer type of experience. And then I met Chris, the CEO, co-founder of Recursion, and we actually worked on like the business plan over that summer. And like it was, he just came from his PhD, and he was at University of Utah, and we worked on a team around the idea, and then we kind of got to the end, and we pitched a bunch of VCs, and they were like half of them fell asleep, but then we were like, there was nothing really wrong with this, and so he went back and he's like, I think I'm going to start this company. And then he called me, and I was like, I'm just going to finish med school if that's okay. So I didn't join. And it was like forever the most expensive decision I ever made. But I ended up joining in 2016, so a couple years later. And so basically moved out to Utah and like showed up, and it was like 10 people, and we had to go raise a Series A. And I think an interesting lesson is like, none of us knew what we were doing at the beginning. Like we were kind of just bunch of folks like starting a company in Utah. And you just learn really quickly and you get forced to learn everything. And we hired really quickly and built teams and figured out what we needed to figure out and, learned how to turn that, the ML platform into a drug discovery engine, identify drugs, move drugs into the clinic. And so it was really sort of a very startup journey, which you don't often get in biotech. And a whole lot of fun. So I was there through IPO, and then in 2022, I left to go found Noetic. And really sort of the vision behind founding Noetic was, over my experience in the industry, it just felt like there was this core problem in drug discovery, which is we do all this work preclinically, in animal models and cell culture and in model systems, and then we get these drugs to the clinic and we don't know how to position them in patients. So for example, you're running an oncology trial, and if you think of lung cancer, there isn't lung cancer, it's 10 different types of diseases, and we rarely know which patients are going to respond to the drug. And so really sort of the founding thesis behind Noetic was, can we generate a whole bunch of cancer data and then train foundation models that can basically understand different patient populations and give us sort of an insight into which drugs will work in which patient. So there's a whirlwind.
Yeah. John?
There's a lot of parallels with that we'll get to. So my origin story is, I remember as a kid, I was probably 3, 4, 5, 6. I would always wake up in the middle of the night to watch Formula One races with my dad. And so I wrote down, what are you going to be at the end of, when you grow up? I always wrote aerodynamicist. I looked on every year, and that's what I thought I'd do in life. And so I went. I did my undergrad at UBC in Vancouver, and I applied to 2 grad schools in the U.S. One was Stanford, one was MIT. Got rejected from MIT first, and then that Stanford letter came. I'm like, oh, cool. I knew nothing about Stanford, but I thought it was on the East Coast. Yeah, in Canada, we're very insulated. And then, so again, I thought I was going to do computational fluid dynamics of all things. And then I got a knock on my door from a co-founder, a future co-founder of mine, saying, hey, I have an issue with my upper airway. Can you come help me out? And I thought, well, let's use CFD to try to simulate your upper airway using a CT scan. And he was very entrepreneurial. And so basically being at Stanford, being part of what's called Hoover Tower, it's syndrome, whatever that phrase is that you're kind of pulled in through the community. So as part of that program, we got invited to, we decided to pitch an idea to do patient-specific modeling for sleep apnea. And it was through the pre-program, so the program in innovation entrepreneurship, so which is pre-Ignite at Stanford, yeah. So we did the whole program, we pitched the VCs, and it was a terrible idea. The VCs are nice, oh, interesting, get some more data, blah, blah, but there was no chance. Yeah.
It's the standard.
Yeah, it's too early. And then when we realized, hey, I was more on the technical side, he was more on the business side, to say, hey, is there an opportunity to think about how patient-specific modeling can be used in healthcare? Because at the time, this was 2010, late 2010, precision medicine was just coming out, big data was coming out, but AI was not a thing yet, really. So then we kind of followed the Paul Yock biodesign playbook of trying to interview as many physicians as possible to understand where's the pain point, where are folks willing to pay money ideally to help solve. And then we interviewed, like I said, 100 folks, and then we, through that process, we met 2 other physicians at Stanford that were doing 40 flow MRI, so basically measuring blood flow non-invasively using an MRI machine. And we said, hey, this is a great opportunity. In hindsight, that was not a great opportunity. There was not enough of a business there, not enough of, the market was too small. Even though in your Excel file, you can do some magical projections on structural heart disease and how important that is in the world and how important diagnostics are in that, it was just fast forward to 2025, 15 years later, and that market is still $30 million. That's where we started. And then, we worked very hard on that product, which was called 40 Flow. We got FDA clearance for that in 2014. And then we were a fairly small team, and then the AI kind of papers started coming out, especially in healthcare. Again, when you think about deep learning, that came out 2012, but in healthcare it was still very new. And we decided in late 2014, you know what? And this is kudos to my co-founder. He's like screw whatever techniques you were using before, any like random forests, like regression. Let's go all in on deep learning. And I looked at him like it was like so new. I'm like, oh man, like we have so many other problems to work on, and like automatic segmentation is not one of them. But kudos to him to like invest in that space, and we said, why not? So we hired a team of like 5 folks that all they did for 2015 was just build a deep learning model from scratch, and we were the first ones to get FDA clearance for this deep learning model in 2016, and then we expanded from what was at the time cardiac imaging to just more generally radiology AI, so trying to detect disease from CT, MRIs, X-rays primarily. And then we kind of expanded into multiple use cases in that. And then kind of fast forward to, through the late kind of beginning of COVID, is that like we definitely ran through some hurdles. And I can get into all of those hurdles. But, fast forward to 2022, Tempus, which was in a precision medicine company, was very interested to embed radiology and insights from radiology images into their multimodal data sets to ultimately for commercialization and for just building stronger AI. And that eventually they acquired Arteris, and I've been there for the past 3 years, and it's been awesome.
Amazing. Well, very interesting stories and coming from different backgrounds. And I literally had a conversation right before this with someone in the audience who was thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and said, why do people start? And I said, well, I often see two personas. It's either one who's been deep in the space and has been like, I've seen this so many times and here's this huge gap and I need to go figure it out. And then I find the others who's like, I am an entrepreneur at heart and I'm itching to go start something. And I feel like we have exactly these 2 prototypes up here. So I'm curious just to hear that, like, what was that pull? What was that moment? And this journey is so hard in the early days of figuring out, like, am I doing the right thing? At what point did it click for you that you said, whether or not it worked out the way you'd hoped, that you said, there's something here, I am compelled, I want to dedicate my career, or at least this phase of my career to it?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it was a little bit. So I'd gone into medicine because I was incredibly inspired to basically make it. Inspired is the wrong word. I was very frustrated by the lack of progress we've made in medicine. It's like you look at the progress of scientific work, and we have made enormous progress understanding biology, genomics, everything, and arguably the progress in therapeutics is farther behind. And so, and as you start to interact as an individual, as a person with the healthcare system, I think you start to see that you're like, why can't we do anything about this disease? This is very frustrating. So that was sort of my inspiration for going into medicine, and I was going to go down the path of doing translational research in academia and trying to discover new drugs. And at some point, again, it was just sort of like being around Silicon Valley and seeing people starting companies and really kind of doing things at a speed and scale that seemed very different than like the research I was doing in the lab as a PhD student. That was my initial spark, and it was, can we solve some of the same problems that we're solving in sort of the startup ecosystem, building a company. And then that kind of, I never had like a full plan for, okay, you must start a company. It was really kind of, for me, it was about, okay, let's explore kind of the first step in this regime of like, what would I do? And so going to the business school program was the first step. And I find that as you start to find yourself in like a regime of in like space that like fits, everything just becomes like a lot more fun. And so that was like my first experience. I was like, oh, this is actually a lot of fun. I love working with like a small team of people on this like hard problem and like thinking about really ambitious goals. And then that kind of set my trajectory. And I was at that point I would have it seemed like it would have been fun to start a company. I didn't really have sort of a a company idea in mind, and I had spent time working on kind of the pre-recursion company ideas. So for me, it felt like a really good fit. Like, hey, I'll go join this like really early stage thing, and at least get kind of the experience of going from like seed stage through however long we could exist, and then just see where we go from there. And so that whole journey was just just a lot of fun. I mean, it's like so fast paced. Every day you're doing something new, and you kind of blink and it's been like 6 years. And so from there, I left Recursion and I was like, okay, I have to do this again. Let's start another one.
Yeah, I would say it was a very similar story on my end. The reason why I got into medicine initially was, so my dad died of cancer, and like when I was about 20, and I realized, if I'm going to do something for the rest of my life, I would love to make an impact, because a lot of the folks that I was from Canada, we're working on like forestry and working on like oil and gas, and like listen, those industries aren't as exciting as healthcare. I think it's a very difficult problem, and I also like love that about healthcare. It's like it's mushy, it's hard, and like just with all the biologics, it's just it's just fun to try to work on this and try to crack the nut. And then I'd say like on the entrepreneurial side, very similar story of just like you're around similar people. I remember we were part of StartX. We were part of several incubators, QB3, Hattery, and there was I think one more in there. But when you're in those environments, it's like contagious. Like everyone is just so excited and moving so fast. Like I remember this team of 3 kids. They were working. They got in at 11 a.m. and they left at like 3 in the morning. And I would come in early and I would say like there's ramen from the day before, and they were just cranking so hard. And that was something like, man, like I just felt compelled to like work as hard as they could. And this is pre-kids, and like that's just like a different level of commitment. And so, yeah, it's contagious. I got involved, and then like you just build up with your co-founder, like having a buddy like do this with you, also just like fuels the fire.
How much of it was it for you both in terms of, you hear a lot of themes around the people, the contagion, the teamwork, the thinking, versus the idea and the concept? Like which was more compelling to you? And John, we talked about this a little bit too. When you're early, you haven't quite built, and what you have are ideas, you're sort of in this uncanny valley of like, you're hypothesizing about product market fit and you just don't know and you haven't tested, and you test some things and it might work and it might not. You test it again, it might work and it might not. And at what point is it, how do you navigate that uncertainty of like, is this the idea or is it the team? What keeps you going between these two things when you just don't quite know yet?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely the team. We pivoted, I would say, 10 times. And looking back, this pivot is like an insane pivot. Now, I can tell you the story of how it's all woven together, how consistent this story is. Absolutely not. Like for investors, they want to see like, we would never use the word pivot. It's like, oh, well, we added a product or we like changed our business model but like I can tell you, we absolutely pivoted. It was a complete disaster. And we're like, we have to do something completely new or else we're going to run out of money. And so like we had several of those like dive moments. That's, yeah, definitely was like as a team, we like stood together through those moments, and we got through it. I think that's part of the reason why I would put the team over the idea. But you really need both to succeed if you're going to be a unicorn.
Just add that you have to be an optimist. I mean, you must be an optimist at a startup because you're sort of building a thing that hasn't been built before, and so there are like 2 ways to look at a thing that's like half built and crappy. If you're like a perfectionist, you're like, what is this? This is like not even a functional like product at all. It's like this barely exists. Like I can't use this. And that will persist until you're like 99.9% to like the final product, but you'll never get there at a startup because you have to test it, you have to use it, you have to try and get things out to customers, you have to figure out like how things work. And so I think you really have to be sort of optimistic and like try to find that moment when you have like the first thread of, oh, okay, I can see that, this crazy idea is starting to work, a little bit, and shockingly so because it's actually a really crazy idea. And we're gonna start like pushing on it and really starting to figure out like how we can make it better. And so I think it's really important to sort of have that point of view that, to be able to catch the moment when something is just working enough that you should, really push forward on it rather than like keep exploring the scope of possibilities.
I know we just have a couple minutes. I'll have maybe 2 more questions for you two. Again, on just the journey, one of my favorite Disney movies is Inside Out. The memories that you create. In my mind, as an investor and thinking about entrepreneurs, I call them oh shit moments. And there are many oh shit moments. There's the good oh shit moments, like, oh shit, that customer signed the contract and haven't built this product yet. There's the oh shit, this didn't work, or oh shit, we're running out of cash. And I think these can be very pivotal moments when entrepreneurs are faced to make hard decisions and you start to have a little bit of clarity about what you do, what your business is. I'd love to hear a couple of your oh shit moments and how that sort of defined your business or your career or something like that. And I also think about them in the context of this is a roller coaster. You'll have many oh shit moments along the way for all the different reasons that this hasn't been done before. But how do you hold those oh shit moments with you closely and the ups and the downs to really get you through it?
So first thing that I'd say is you don't share your oh shit moments with the rest of the team. Like you got to keep it like really tightly controlled, because as a leader or as an entrepreneur, to the optimism point, it's like now I can share these oh shit moments, but at the time it absolutely not. Like, oh fuck, we totally screwed up. What the hell are we gonna do? Like we were just in complete panic. But now I laugh about it, but I'll give you a couple of those moments. We signed a term sheet, I think this was for our Series Seed, that had a little clause at the bottom saying that we were authorized to work in the United States. Okay, because at the time, both of our entrepreneurs, we didn't have green cards or anything. And we're like, fine, we were forced to sign this thing because we had no other option, but we didn't have a green card. We didn't have citizenship. And we moved mountains to lobby on Capitol Hill in order to get a green card, and we got it by sending letters to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who forwarded to it was an insane story. That's a whole separate thread. So that was one. The second one I'd say was we raised capital on the fact that GE Healthcare was going to move forward with this product that we required, and then we had it in our pitch deck and all that, and then I don't know, a week later, GE Healthcare came to us and said, no, we're not doing that. And we felt like we betrayed our investors. And at the time, we were just complete awe. We're absolutely, oh shit, what the hell are we gonna do? And I can just describe that whole story in terms of how we convinced GE to eventually do it. But yeah, at the time, that wasn't fun.
How did that leave you in terms of maybe what are some of the lessons coming from those oh shit moments? Also, I love the span of what it means to build a company between lobbying Congress for a green card to, and obviously contracting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's like a fight or flight. For me, it was very much okay, well, it is what it is. We got to move forward. Let's write down all the other options and let's have a communication plan and just try to think of plan A, B, C, and D. When everything is going well, you don't think about these things. When everything's going bad, we had to. There was no other choice. And also at the time, when these things happen, I think the biggest thing is payroll. When you're running out of cash and there's these oh shit moments, that for me was just, it hit me personally of the hardest part. You can upset a customer, you can lose a customer, you can not get an FDA clearance. There's everything you can kind of get around. But when you miss your mortgage payment, that was for me the biggest personal oh shit moment. Yeah.
I think SVB is a sponsor here. So we had, our first oh shit moment at Noetic was we had all our money in SVB after we just closed our round. And then so I'm over the weekend am I gonna have to do payroll myself? But that ended up being less of an oh shit moment, as it were. But I was just thinking of a technical oh shit moment that we had at Recursion. So we had, this is a little bit one for the bio people, but we had sort of built this whole platform on RNA interference, siRNA, because at that moment, at the time we started the company in 2016, a lot of the tech behind CRISPR wasn't sort of scalable in the way we needed to, and it turns out siRNA is terrible. So these are reagents that are supposed to knock out genes, but they actually knock out lots of genes in a particular experiment, and massively messy. And we had like our data science team were like incredible mathematicians, and they had like over the years like maybe come up with like the best solution in existence for how to like build models with these terrible reagents. And so we had like this huge proprietary advantage on using siRNA, and we had been using it for 4 or 5 years, and it was like kind of our workhorse. But we were kind of getting to the point where we were like, we could do about like 20% of things with high confidence that we wanted to do in terms of like the genetics. And then at one point we decided, well, let's try CRISPR again. And it turned out like CRISPR was like 1,000 times better. And like all the stuff we had done to like optimize siRNA actually like made CRISPR even better than that. And so we were like, okay, we have just generated like 4 years worth of data, and like now we're going to switch to CRISPR, and we're going to have to change like our whole workflow in terms of how we run experiments and how we like treat cells in the dish and how we generate data. We're going to like lose a lot of the data we generated. So it was sort of a big deal. It was like a pretty big oh shit moment. Like and we're going to have to stop the company for like a few months to do this. So we were like, okay, what do we do here? And ultimately we decided like, okay, you have to like slow down a little bit to speed up. And so we did, and we basically just like shut everything down. We switched everything to CRISPR, and actually we had to switch to like one version and another version. So it took us maybe 3-4 months to kind of do this whole transition. But at the end, that ended up like unlocking a whole new, so we had like at the very beginning our view was, well, if we run all these screens and we knock out every gene one at a time, then we can like one day in the future get to like all of biology. It turned out we can just get there with CRISPR by not running screens, but running individual experiments because the reagents were so clean. So like that, that oh shit moment, which created a lot of like frustration and like fear in terms of like what should we do, ended up like unlocking kind of the like really the vision behind the company that we thought was so far away, but like brought it very close. And like once we had the first results from CRISPR, and then we were able to scale them to whole genome, we literally had kind of this, this very ambiguous, future-looking thing that we were dreaming about, but it actually worked with CRISPR. So
amazing. I know we're already at time, but I feel like no AI conference can go without the question of what's next in AI. Where are you spending your time and efforts in terms of what you're building and what you think the opportunity is?
So I'm a little biased, but what's next in AI is for us structuring all of our data. Like we have like multimodal data, and making that available for foundation models, for RAG, for other agentic pipelines. That's how I spend like 100% of my time. And it's not easy. You think it's like, oh, just put it into a data lake and everything works. It's just it's hard to correlate all these different encounters across all these different machines, all these different hospitals, health systems. That is, for me, if we can do that well and have like outcome data, clinical data, genomic data, all of that, it can help power what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems with AI and bio, and maybe I'll be totally wrong on this, but I'll keep saying it until then, is I just don't think there's enough data out there in the public domain that's like as usable as we would like. There's a large scale of data, but I think the problem is when you have like really noisy, sparse data and you're like many orders of magnitude below where you need to like brute force the problem, then it's actually less helpful than having less data that's like less noisy, more ordered, like more fit for purpose. And so again, my recursion bias speaking, I still think we're sort of in a regime where in bio, there's just we can't just collect everything because there's just not enough out there. And so we sort of need to build fit for purpose data sets. And so for us, we are seeing a lot of value with just generating, very paired data, in our labs where we can sort of control every part of the process, and, seeing progress on models that, people can't get to with like, a lot more data from the public domain. So I think that's important. So it is a question about, are we going to get to sort of a point where you can, just collect like all the data that's out there and train models? that will be a lot more powerful. So that's an open question for me. I think the other thing is, like, you know, it feels like right now every like 2 months we have like kind of a new theme. I think it's like agentic AI is like the new theme, and then I don't know what's gonna. And it's not that these are not useful. I actually think, like, you know, foundation models are useful and agentic AI is useful, but we also like need to kind of push all of these things to the extreme of where they're useful too. So it's important to not like kind of work in one regime and then go, okay, well, like everyone's talking about this now, let's like skip over here, and then, because we're just not going to build the sort of full capabilities of what we can do in one space. And so I just think it's important to think about, you know, a lot of what we do is we train, you train smaller models, and then when you start to see things are working, then you start to scale them, and then you really start to push the limits. So I think it's important for us, like as a space, to continue to you know, push the limits of what we're seeing that's working, and you know, be a little bit cautious about like continuously moving to like kind of the next version of a thing, just because it's like, you know, the next buzzword in articles.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. We, on the investing side, hear a lot about agentic AI, multimodal. I'll be honest to say I don't actually see a lot of it in actual applications, as to the extent that the, you know, sort of hype and expectations of it. So, I mean, you know, we're in the process, and we'll see. But I hope over the next year or so, people really figure out how to like truly automate things in the way that we as industry hope we can. So I want to save some time for some questions from the audience. I don't know if there's going to be a mic going around, or if people just want to raise their hands.
Yes, perhaps one.
We have one over here.
Any questions? Any brave souls?
What are some of the good moments? Because you only like a definition lesson both in the good and bad sense, but you only share the negative experiences.
I guess we can call it something else, maybe the oh yay moments.
I would say definitely for us, it was FDA clearances. Every time we got one of those, it was like a huge company party. I'd say like every fundraise, even though I hate doing it, is definitely exciting. Like for me, raising capital shouldn't be an exciting moment. It should be like what you do with that capital. Every enterprise deal that we had, like over hundreds of thousands of dollars, definitely was a great moment that we would celebrate the company. And I'd say like definitely like technological breakthroughs, like when we were able to like inject our first deep learning model into the clinical interface that we had, and actually have physicians use it for the first time. Super cool. I remember that moment vividly. And also I'd say the other, just like breaking grounds in terms of like, we were doing some like cloud 40 flow rendering, and people said we couldn't do it with GPUs in the cloud and streaming and all that stuff. And we did. And at that moment, I remember like our developer showing me the prototype, like so cool. And we celebrated. Yeah, those are a few.
Yeah, I would just say things working is like, but this is also where you have to be an optimist, because like, you know, for me, I'm a super optimist. So I like, if I see like a hint of the thing working, and usually the things you're trying to do are ridiculous, right? We're like, can we push all these like images of tumors into transformers and have them find patients that respond to like, you know, cancer therapies? It's sort of insane, right? Like, why should that happen? Like, there's no reason for that to happen. And you know, all of a sudden you see that, like, you know, someone you know, post a result, and you're like, okay, the model has found like the patients that respond to Keytruda, which is an immune therapy, and the thing that it's picking up on are all the like things that humans know to be true for those patients. And you're like, what? This makes sense. Oh shit. It's like amazing. So I think you should have a lot of those moments too, where things just start working. And the way to get more of those moments is just like startup advice. You just have to do things. You just have to be fearless and take risks. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I can just say, what's the one thing that if you could change would have the biggest impact? You know, like it could be some law that it doesn't exist now, so if it could change, it would make a big impact. Or like genomics, like let's say you could get full kind of super 100x depth sequencing, for $1, right? So that you get a whole bunch more data. But what's that one thing, like the biggest rate limiting factor that you think that if changed could like supercharge AI?
Can you repeat the question?
What's the one thing that you could change right now that would supercharge AI? Maybe this isn't like 100% like the best answer, but I think one thing that first comes to mind for me, having seen like two different eras of this, is right now, specifically AI and bio right now, we are, we're not open AI and we have like, millions of GPUs. So like AI and bio right now is coming up against like the challenge in that, we can access the scale of data or generate the scale of data that we need to train like really powerful models. And we are starting to get to the point where, we are compute limited in terms of being capital limited, because, a lot of VCs aren't like, oh, we're gonna, give you $100 million to buy a cluster as a bio company. And I'm seeing that on the industry side at a much larger scale, but I'm also hearing it like on the academic side at a smaller scale, where like I talk to folks and I'm like, people at MIT, what are you using to train models? And they're like, well, we don't really have like a huge cluster or anything. And so I think like the compute, it's not that like the world is compute limited, it's more that like industries, researchers in sort of the space of biology, I think are more compute limited than they should be.
For me, it would be the ability to have a key fob that has my entire clinical record on it, and any derivative data that any other company creates off me isn't fully in my control. So think of like it doesn't have to be blockchain, but like some ledger or something that you control, that you get a text message and you can opt in to share with anybody that you want for an hour, for a day. Like if that was so simple to do, it could power what we do.
Google Health.
It could be like Google Health. But I know that vision of just like in France, they kind of have this idea of this like, you have this physical device that has your data in it. It doesn't have your genomic data, it doesn't have your imaging data, but in a world 20 years from now, I think we can get there. And once you unlock that, like you can have this, all the data you need, and at that point you're not going to be compute constrained.
Yeah, it's sort of funny because you tech companies have everything that you do on your phone, right? And I almost like, just to be a little controversial, you could say, well, would I rather John has all the information about everything I do on my phone, or would I rather that John has my health record? I don't know which one makes me more nervous, actually. I mean, there's the whole insurance thing and everything, but
I will say, in a previous life, I worked on healthcare data policy. And so, there's the 21st Century Cures Act, the Patient Access and Interoperability Rules. I think we're getting there in terms of having some standards. The problem was never that the technology. I mean, this, especially if you move into the commercialization world. It's just that people don't care. They expect their doctors to manage and figure all that out for them. So if someone can find out the business model between getting patients to care, and we've seen them in terms of paying patients or giving patients the ability to have ownership, sell their data, provision all their data. It just hasn't gotten there, but love the topic. And so I think with that we'll wrap up. But I guess just the last, so I want to thank Ron and John for really just giving us the real here, which is what I told them to do before we stepped on here. So hope you walked away with some, just a deeper level of like what it means to be an entrepreneur versus the stories that you hear oftentimes in the world for companies that succeed and not. And I'll maybe just make a little plug for myself. Selfishly, being a venture capitalist here in a room of incredible people building in healthcare and AI, we're early stage investors. This is, a highly curated group because we think a lot about when you just have that idea and you just want to start that business, what does it mean? And so think of us, Define Ventures, as a partner to you all. We do anything from seed to Series B. I'm going to be part of the roundtable as well, talking about institutional financing. But definitely just feel open and free to reach out with sort of questions. I'm here and would love to chat with you all. So with that, Vicky, I'll hand it back to you.
So again, thank you so much, Hong, Ron, and John for an honest and insightful conversation. We will now take a quick break to recharge and connect. We will try, in the interest of time, we'll try to be back by 2:15. So please enjoy a cup of coffee and I will see you. So next up, we're shifting gears to our lighting talks. Those are sharp lessons from leading actors that have taken their ideas from concept to product. Each speaker will share their practical takeaways from their own building journey. First up, we have Dr. Nikesh Kotecha from Stanford Healthcare giving a talk on building organizational frameworks for sustainable AI programs. Dr. Nikesh Kotecha is a senior leader in biomedical informatics and a seasoned entrepreneur driving innovation in cancer immunotherapy. As a vice president of informatics at the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, he has the integration of computational and molecular technologies to accelerate the development of transformative immune-based treatments. He co-founded Cytoban, a pioneer company in single-cell proteomics and cytometry analytics. Dr. Kotecha holds a PhD in biomedical informatics from Stanford University and a bachelor in biomedical engineering from Boston University. His career spans roles in engineering, business development, and technical leadership at organizations including TIBCO, Spotfire, and Pfizer. Please join me in welcoming Nikesh Kotecha.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for the organizing committee to inviting me, and thank you for everyone for coming and spending some time here today. I started out writing this talk with this particular title in mind because, classic thing, I've given this talk before, I'm like, all right, I can just use those slides to kind of see what's happening. And then I looked at the description, and I looked at kind of what the goals were. And I realized that while this is really important, what might actually be better is this. And I said relearned very acutely because I think, as you probably heard from the previous speakers too, you'll kind of see this phase of people in their journeys. They keep like doing similar things and the motifs kind of coming out, and you end up relearning a lot of things you probably learned before as you go along. So I'll give you a little bit of just background on my journey a little bit, and then kind of use that to tell you a lot more about what we're doing at Stanford Healthcare now and how we're thinking about things moving forward. So my journey, just like everyone else that's here, it started out by thinking about health, health and technology, health and CS, health and AI, health and add your buzzword. And you really kind of start thinking about, okay, how do we make an impact in health? And if you just zoom out really high and you kind of think about the last 30, 40, 50 years, how have we been thinking about healthcare, right? Usually it comes down to some sort of rules. We have some kind of rule. If there's a risk of something happening is greater than some threshold, then we're going to do something, right? And when we think about what that means is we take that and we make an action out of it. We're either going to decide whether to treat someone or we decide how we're going to treat them, right? I'm simplifying a lot, but hopefully that's okay. And then we start our journey, right? Whether it is a technology journey, whether it's a scientific journey, whether it's an AI journey, whether it's an organizational journey, to really think about like, how am I going to think through this, right? So you either go down the road of classifying something, predicting something, deciding how to recommend something, and then you're kind of thinking about, hey, am I thinking about this from a drug discovery perspective? I'm really thinking about the science and what that's going to do. Am I thinking about it from a clinical practice perspective? How am I actually like getting this healthcare in practice? What are my clinicians or my nurses doing? Or am I thinking from a delivery perspective, right? Which today doesn't include just what happens to a patient when they come to a clinic, but what happens when a patient's wearing their wearables, all the different things that are out there as you look at it. And today we just don't think about a rule. We think about a model, we think about foundation models, and we still think about rules, right? So this is what we do day in and day out. And one of the reasons I bring this grid up is it's really important to kind of understand what box you're in when you're in this phase of your journey, right? So for example, I've had, sorry about that. I've really had the privilege of working across this entire spectrum, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. My early days, I worked a bunch with between my PhD and the startup I ran around single-cell analysis and how to think about cytometry data. Then I got the opportunity to actually think about the practice of medicine as we worked on at the Park Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, really thinking about like how do we get these things out and what are the types of trials that you need to put in place to kind of get to those high-risk, high-reward outcomes. I got so excited about all the research that was happening that I was like, hey, this is going to be awesome. We're going to have these amazing drugs, which I know, vision. But how are we going to actually get them to the health system? And I couldn't answer that question, which has led me to my latest journey, which is what does the health system do and how do we actually get stuff going as we go through. So again, the reason I kind of bring this up is like if you think back as to what's happened in this space and what you're looking at, what's changed, right? If I just think about the last 10 years, we used to think about unsupervised versus supervised. Now we think about predictive and generative. We think about foundation models. Data infrastructure has certainly been amazing. The way I think about my data infrastructure today is very different than even what I thought about 2 or 3 years ago. And we have quicker feedback loops, right? Things like CGMs are out that make it easier. We can actually get actionable information much faster than waiting to go to the doctor for 2 months, 3 months, et cetera. What hasn't changed? Healthcare is still about stakeholder and incentive alignment. I have seen that in every phase, especially at a health system. It really is about incentive alignment. And really kind of understanding that box that you're in and why it's important to solve the problem for that particular box, right? That becomes still, I think, the critical thing. And so I would encourage you guys to just keep that in mind. Again, regardless of what phase of the journey you're in, that becomes the critical thing that I don't think will change even in the next 5, 10 years. So a little bit about Stanford Medicine. So as I kind of go into Stanford Healthcare, just give you a high-level overview of what we're doing there. So Stanford Medicine, you guys might have heard, sometimes you hear School of Medicine, sometimes you hear Stanford Healthcare, et cetera. Just to kind of like level set everyone, Stanford Medicine is our big umbrella. So under our big umbrella, we have our School of Medicine, our Children's Hospital, and what we call Stanford Healthcare. Stanford Healthcare is we have 2 hospitals under Stanford Healthcare, one on campus, and then one here in the Tri-Valley area up in Pleasanton. And then we have a slew of clinics down across the bay, which are now Stanford Medicine clinics, and so we work with those and our partners. A lot of the work that we do in our group supports kind of the ecosystem here, which is the School of Medicine and Stanford Healthcare as we're going along. We're not a big hospital compared to the Kaisers out there. UCSF, I think, is comparable. Someone check me on that. But we have about 800 beds that we're licensed for. We see about 70,000 emergency visits a year and about 2 million outpatient visits, kind of give or take, as we're going through. So, what are we doing in terms of AI at Stanford Healthcare? And again, kind of thinking about that box, I'm really going to focus on these types of things when I'm kind of, again, sitting on the health system side, thinking about the practice of medicine and a little bit about the delivery of medicine. So we have a lot of things that we think about that are more administrative, like how do we help our rev cycle teams do kind of the work that they need to do. We certainly think about patient engagement as a core pillar for the experience that we want to make sure our patients have. A lot of work around the quality and clinical decision support. And as you can imagine, clinician efficiency is a key thing that everyone is thinking through, not necessarily just for time saving, but for burnout, and just really kind of making sure that we can get to our missions as a hospital, not just for healthcare, but also as a premier research institution to go through. So just some examples of the types of efforts that we have going on at Stanford Healthcare. So there's a lot of work around physician in-basket burden. We've published quite a bit on that, so you've probably seen it. Ambient AI is also a big thing, as you can imagine, in terms of streamlining clinical documentation. We've done a pretty good job, I think, in just terms of like getting GPTs for use across SHC. I think this is pretty common now at most places, but about a couple of years ago when we first did this, we would see a lot of our docs trying to use OpenAI, trying to use other services, and we're a little worried about PHI compliance, and so we spent a little bit of time. And really now anyone with a Stanford ID or Stanford Healthcare or a SID, which is the Stanford Healthcare version, has access to pretty much any model they want in a PHI compliant way to be able to start using kind of see what's going on. And then the final thing is something, Nigam Shah, who will probably talk, I think, on Friday, really, as he came on as a first chief data scientist, really had a vision of, hey, how are we going to kind of get this information? What do we need to do to kind of get the enterprise AI ready, and what does that mean? And that led to the formation of this team that I ran to really think about how to build these capabilities for predictive and general models at SHC. So just kind of give you a few kind of vignettes of the types of things that we've been doing. The efforts we have kind of a little bit of a split personality. We have kind of two areas that we think a lot about. So one is really about how do we use our in-house platforms and capabilities to build and deliver solutions. And the flip side of that is how do we help bring the organization along? Because as you can imagine, in employees of about 15,000, AI is not one person's job, AI is everyone's job. And so what do we need to do to kind of really enable the organization to be able to use these tools as they're coming along? So in this case, we have a lot of work that I'm going to gloss over at a very high level. Connor's in our audience, so he can give you more details. But really thinking across three things, right? First of all, we need to be able to connect to a variety of the data sources we have at SHC. As you can imagine, we do have a lot of EMR data, but certainly that's not the only thing. We work a lot with imaging data as well, and claims data, et cetera, all of those things. We've gone down the road of building a variety of different ways of looking at predictive generative approaches. And so, kind of not just a platform to start. When I first started about a couple of years ago, it was all about predictive. Very quickly, language models have really shifted that equation. And then the final thing that we've thought a lot about is, we need to kind of make sure that these results get delivered into wherever the users are. So if it's a clinician, can we get it into Epic? If it needs to be in a business system, how do we get there? And to work very closely with our integration team to kind of make sure that the result can get back to wherever it's going to make the most sense and is the most actionable. A couple examples of the types of things we've been doing and kind of getting out there. We've done some work around advanced care planning, so the use of machine learning models to help identify patients that might be eligible for an advanced care planning conversation. A few months ago, we ran into a capacity issue at our ER, where we were getting a lot of folks coming in, and one of the things that you can't do as a hospital is, build a lot of things very quickly. And so we've had partnerships with various hospitals and clinics in the area who allow us to brand some of their capacity as Stanford. And so it was like, hey, we have extra beds there, but how do we figure out which patients make sense to go there? And this was a very manual process that clinicians would be spending, looking at 100 to 200 cases, looking through all the text that was in there to understand. And so we used language models to be able to kind of figure out a way to pre-automate that and actually kind of deliver some reports that allows them to kind of say, hey, these guys are eligible for transfer to this particular unit. And then those types of use cases are coming out even more. We recently put some stuff out to kind of look at peripheral artery disease. So this is something that's fairly underdiagnosed in the area. And if we can actually identify these patients earlier and bring that intervention in sooner, you actually can, from a patient perspective, hopefully help them not get down a road of like having to remove a limb. And if you can catch them early enough, you can actually like have an intervention that's a statin actually that can be very useful. And then finally, we just released a few weeks ago a way to actually use language models within your EHR itself. And so we've kind of put together a lot of work to really kind of get something we call chat EHR to have a window within Epic where you can actually, using a language model, be able to chat with the patient's record and start asking different questions and understand what's going on. Lots of hoops to kind of get to that that I'm happy to talk through over drinks. But it was like really interesting just to kind of figure out, okay, how do we do that? What are the right guardrails we put in? And what is it going to be useful for as we kind of move forward? On the other side, which again, like I said, it's like a split personality, we can do a lot of stuff, but again, AI is something we think everyone in the organization needs to be able to do and adopt. And so how do we kind of put something together for an organization that is 15,000, 20,000 people? And that's really started by kind of putting together and defining something we call the responsible AI lifecycle, which has become kind of the umbrella with which we use, which we've built organizational processes to help with adopting AI into our ecosystem. We built on top of that something we call firm assessments, which are very useful, reliable models. Is really kind of a way to understand, okay, hey, are you actually going to get the intervention that you think you are by thinking about this AI solution, and how do you actually bring that into play? Another thing that we spent a lot of time doing and trying to get alignment around is monitoring. Monitoring is something we will hear a lot from regulators, we will hear it from compliance, we will also hear it from, I think, this conference and this audience. It's like, hey, these things are going to be drifting, how are we going to think about monitoring, how do we catch drift, et cetera. The biggest challenge that we ran into actually was getting to a shared language within the organization as to what this means and how to get people talking about it in the right way. And then finally, you need a way to evaluate all these language models and what's going on. And there's been a lot of effort with a bunch of people, partly in this room as well, around something we call MedHome, which we're now using to kind of really, as a framework, to start having the conversations about evaluating language models for healthcare users as we go along. So, as a whirlwind of stuff, I'm around this afternoon, so happy to kind of talk through anything you have. The things to kind of remember is that operational factors often outweigh technical challenges whenever you're thinking about healthcare, right? And I wrote in healthcare in parentheses because that's the industry I've worked in for the most, and so I don't know if it's true in others. I would guess that there's probably some level of this everywhere. For example, a lot of things that we've run into in kind of getting our models deployed has not been technical at all, and I don't think this is new to this audience, but I'll say it. What we see a lot is, your workflow assumptions that people make when they build some of the models miss sometimes very key operational practices, and it's really hard to know that. Having been on both sides of this equation, my view of the hospital was very different 5 years ago when I wasn't working on the health system than it is now. And a lot of times, understanding roles and responsibilities becomes a key thing, especially in an area like a hospital, where everyone's pretty busy with just kind of keeping up with the day-to-day as you're going through. The other thing that was an interesting learning has been just incentive alignment at the healthcare system level. So even if you get everyone aligned, everyone agreeing, you might not have your organizational change in place with the different service lines. And we've even run into reimbursement issues where an AI-driven change, which makes sense and everyone's on board, may not be actually covered by payer. And that has then kind of run into something that we were totally even not anticipating, and having to rethink an entire workflow just because of that is, again, another topic for a drink. But for this audience, I really also want to make sure that I'm not telling you that it's all an operational problem. Technical readiness is pretty key. One of the things that I would say kind of keep in mind is that where you're building your model for your research environment is not necessarily where that model is going to run in the operational side, right? A lot of work, our teams do a lot of work to really enable the research that you see at Stanford, but that ecosystem is one small part of the entire ecosystem that sits on the health system side to support all the work that's happening. And so oftentimes we end up having to rebuild the model whenever it's coming in. Again, not a big deal, but it's still something that we have to kind of think through. Certainly there's data normalization differences, and then inference time is important. So a lot of times, something you may not worry about in research is, hey, I have the data, I'm going to be able to work with it. But if I'm sitting on the operational side, has that data actually come in? Do I need to use historical data? Or, where is the data if I need it from, 2 hours after a patient walked into the ER? That was something critical we had to think about as we deployed language models into our Epic environment. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is we're in an exciting era right now from an AI and tech perspective. And a lot of the challenges that keep me up at night that we're trying to think through is how do we make progress here as a large organization? And I know it's a little bit hard to say that where everyone wants to be in a startup side. I'd say a lot of the same questions happen inside large organizations as well. And the one thing I keep seeing over and over again is AI and tech is evolving hours to days. Every day there's something new. Our ability to absorb it, even as people, I think is probably on the weak side. I'm months behind in all the technologies I need to adopt myself. And our organization certainly moves slower than that. So how do you sync across those three is a common theme that we try and think about, right? Because you have to do it across all of those three to kind of work through. And when you're sitting in an organization, there'll always be challenges. And, again, having been on both sides now, I've always wondered why it was so horrible when I was a startup trying to work with a health system. I'm on this side now, I have a little bit of appreciation. And I'd say there's this book called Friction by Bob Sutton, which I highly recommend people read. And friction is good. Sometimes it's intentional. For example, when we're kind of building our frameworks, we actually introduce some friction to make sure that we could get a little bit of space to get it right. And then some are obviously areas where we present opportunities to adopt faster, and kind of identifying and learning those, very useful, whether you're inside an organization or as a startup trying to help an organization kind of get something done. And then last slide, nothing happens without getting a great team in place. I've been really fortunate, both with the people we've brought onto our team, as well as the leadership that really has put the trust in us to be able to kind of deliver and work through all the things that we're doing. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nikesh. It's really inspiring to see all this great work you're doing at Stanford Healthcare, and also touching on different areas, from access to diverse data sources, providing the platform to develop all these new technologies, but also working very closely to the actual workflows, the personal workflows. We have a bit of time, so let's open it up. Are there any questions or thoughts in the audience?
Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, so you gave us some examples of AI applications that are put into practice, and I was wondering if there is also anything in place in terms of clinical decision making, more on the how to treat side, because I guess that's way more difficult in terms of also regulatory factors than administrative stuff, right?
Yeah, so one of the examples on the how to treat side was the peripheral artery disease. So that's something a clinician gets an alert for, makes a referral to vascular, and then the vascular kind of puts together an intervention on place to kind of do it. We have a few other things like that that are in place across 4 or 5 different areas. And then certainly on our imaging side, we have a lot of work that our radiology groups do, which are much more how to treat the patients. So happy to kind of give you some of those examples off topic as well.
In the interest of time, we'll be taking 2 more questions.
Great talk. Thank you for sharing. I was interested in the chat EHR announcement. I know your colleague, Michael Pfeffer, and others have been very proud about the development that went into it. Can you share what was the biggest obstacle getting Epic, the EHR vendor, to agree to this? And what do you think the future will allow you guys to do to share this with other organizations?
All right, on the Epic one, ask for forgiveness. It's maybe my thought there. And again, it's not taking away with anything in terms of what Epic is doing or anything like that. So Epic does give you a way to kind of be able to bring in applications within their ecosystem. So we just stayed within that framework. And actually that was very useful for us too, because it allowed us to use the same role-based access that they already had in place. Your challenges were twofold. One was kind of this piece around getting to the data, the timely data that you needed. So for example, one of the examples I showed there was around this transferring to a new unit. So if someone's coming to our ED and they're 2 hours in, that data is not sitting in our Clarity tables, right? It takes about a day to kind of get there. So if I need real-time information with all of that data, how do I get to that, and what does that look like? And our data science and integration teams actually did some pretty incredible work that we just got one of those awards for, which is how do you kind of get that in a timely way? Because your fire calls that are supported will actually not work in the way you think. And then the second is really around evaluation, as well as how much can you actually fit within a context window. And so those are both still active challenges, I'd say. But we've had some smart ways of just kind of thinking through that right now as we're putting out. And then we're hoping to get this out broadly as we can. So.
And if I may add to the same question, I'm curious how the rollout went for chat EHR, which specialties were prioritized and why, and so forth. And also, as a patient myself and as an innovator, physicians don't have the time to Google, then also, chat with a product that may or may not give them reliable information. I'm really curious how that went out with the rollout and different specialists and their unique needs.
Yeah, so rollout is, again, with anything this new, there's it's not as planned as you want it to be, or like those things, I think we'll have better plans kind of coming out, but it's really been around finding those physicians and people who are interested and are willing to kind of put some time in. And we actually didn't just focus on physicians. We had nurses, we had operations folks as well. And it's really about just, okay, hey, is this actually helping? Tell us what's going on. Tell us where the components are. How can we actually figure out what's right versus wrong? And we're very clear, at least on the UI interface of it, that, be careful with what you have, kind of let us know what's there. One of the key things we had to do also was kind of be able to bring in care everywhere data, because a lot of the questions people wanted to ask were for data that wasn't necessarily at Stanford. The other part of all of this is we actually kind of built it out as a platform. So like the transfer use case, for example, uses the same underlying platform to be able to do that. And so what we're doing is, as we figure out these, what we call automation use cases, we can be much more scoped about it and put a broader or stronger evaluation regime around that, and have something that we can kind of go out, okay, for this particular use case, here's the answer in your particular Epic report or your flow sheet or whatever makes the most sense for the work that you want to do at that time.
Can I ask for the following questions that you share your name, your affiliation, and title, please?
I'm Alex. I've just graduated from Stanford GSV, where I've been investigating benchmarks and evals for LLMs in healthcare. You mentioned Professor Shah's work with regards to MedHelm. I'm curious to ask how you see this evolving. Is there going to be a top-down approach in terms of evals and benchmarking from regulators, or do you see much more of a bottom-up approach that will lead to a fragmented landscape of evaluations? And if it is fragmented, is it going to be focused more on clinical outcome or the types of clinical activities that lead to reimbursement and billing? I'm curious to see where the eval space is going.
So I'll give you my pragmatic answer to this, more so than like the ideal answer. So the ideal answer would be we get everyone kind of coming. It'll be much more holistic, and people are sharing data kind of coming in. I think that's certainly the vision Nigam's trying to kind of put out there and trying to get everyone on. So, again, any of these efforts, as you guys know, they're never perfect, but you've got to start. And so, I think what we're pretty excited about is that we've started and we're getting a lot of interest from the field to kind of come in. Now, that interest from the field is going to obviously have its own incentive-driven pieces, and so I don't have a crystal ball as to kind of what we're going to see from that aspect. The way we're thinking about it internally, though, is as we think about some of these use cases, so some of our data from SHC is actually part of the original MedHelm paper. So that automation use case around transfer, we actually took that data, made it MedHelm formatted, and we were able to put it in. And so our goal, as we kind of do some of our use cases, is to kind of see it as a feedback loop, right? We can use the MedHelm framework, get these automation cases in, make sure that we have the right evaluation regimes, and that kind of feeds MedHelm as we go along. So we're hoping that type of a sort of cycle definitely helps us, but we're hoping others can do the same thing, and which will then help it more broadly. So that's kind of the pragmatic way I look at it.
Thank you so much, Nikesh. Again, a round of applause for Nikesh Kotecha. Next up in our lighting talks is Fereshteh Mahvar. Fereshteh is a staff medical software engineer and cloud solution architect at Google Research, where she currently plays a technical lead role in translating health AI research to open solutions via Google High Def. Prior to her current role, she played a lead role in developing software as a medical device investigational product in Google Health. She has played a role in multiple clinical studies, such as breast cancer screening triage at Northwestern Medicine, automating second reading in the NHS breast cancer screening program and organ contouring for radiation oncology treatment planning at Mayo Clinic. With 20 years of prior industry experience, she began her Google career in 2017 as a solution architect in Google Cloud, providing guidance to large enterprises on their cloud adoption and developing industry blueprints for big data and machine learning. Please welcome Fereshteh Mahvar.
Hello. Thank you for the organizers for bringing all these brilliant minds together, and thank you for listening to me. Fun fact, this picture was taken in 2017 when very ambitiously I was talking about how to set up a Google Cloud environment to have a HIPAA alignment for your workflow. I have been at it for a while, and I have done a lot of things that have been very humbling. So here, we've made a lot of progress. Here we are. So hopefully, we have something interesting to offer to the community. This talk is about accelerating AI-based product development with open models. And this is going to be an introduction to the catalog of models that we offer. They're called Health AI Developer Foundations, HiDeF short. So yes, absolutely, it is incredible time to be a health AI builder. I guess there hasn't been any better time. AI is showing immense power in solving complex problems in health and life sciences domain. Large language models are making a difference. They have simplified the computer-human interaction and making AI very accessible to patients and clinicians. And this has actually created a phenomenon. Like, there's a lot of paranoia on AI that because patients are actually seeing it's useful, the clinicians are seeing its usefulness, they're fueling the demand for AI-based products. So there's a lot of early conversations and hesitations about AI in the loop. It is all of a sudden disappearing because there's demand for it. As we probably are watching generalist models. We are on the race to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and as they pass, as generalist models are becoming better and better. You probably are following our generalist model, Gemini. Every release is better than the previous one. And then the open model community is thriving. If you are tuned into like Hugging Face and all the platforms where the open models are showing up, they're fostering a lot of widespread innovation. So a lot of the innovators like yourselves have this question, like, do I start with a closed model, a generalist model, or do I start with an open model? So in this exercise, I'm sorry it's a little wordy, but hopefully I'll walk you through it. I get this question a lot because we represent open models offered by Google. And at the same time, we have very capable, powerful generalist model like Gemini, which can do a lot of things. Like, when would you start your product? When would you base your product based on Gemini versus something that HiDeF offers? So I'm hoping with this, I give you a framework to assess any closed model against any open model. But I use our own models as an example. So let's take Gemini. Let's ask ourselves these fundamental questions. If the answer to any one of them is no, then that means you can't use that very powerful closed model. So the first one, a lot of times these generalist models are really doing well, but then do they do well enough for your task in mind? Because when you are building something clinical, the performance is paramount. So you have a bar, so you have to try for your task in mind. And then if it doesn't, if out of the box that the model doesn't do well, does it give you enough levers to change it so that it does actually perform well? That depends on your use case. So a lot of times, the answer to that could be yes. Moving on, there's a lot of misconception about the reason for not choosing a closed model. And it could be data privacy and security. Oh, my data is precious, it can't leave. But we've come a long way, like compared to that picture I showed you. Back then, the conversation was about data privacy and security, and it was actually very prohibitive. Like a lot of the institutions could not let go of it. But as time has passed, public cloud providers like Google Cloud have done phenomenal. Like public providers are trusted with data, with privacy and security. So you can sign a BAA and bring PHI to any public cloud. So most of the time, that is not the reason why you go open, but it could be. Some organizations could have very strict policies that doesn't allow the data to leave some sort of a perimeter that it cannot be solved. Or it could be a matter of time. Maybe at the beginning you can't, maybe later you can. So you have to ask yourself. So that could be, sometimes that could be the reason you go open instead of close. The third one is about connectivity. A lot of times use cases, the products have an offline nature to them. So you should ask yourself, can your product be always connected? Could it access the model through an API? If the answer to that is yes, it could always be online, then yeah, any closed model that offers itself as an API could be a solution. The fourth one is the most important one, but you could skip it if your use case doesn't need to prove clinical safety. Because a lot of the use cases, they're not touching human life. As if it's an automation, the risk is not that high. But as you get to diagnostics, as you get to complex problems, a lot of the times you have to be very worried about the clinical safety, and you should ask yourself, who's guaranteeing clinical safety of this model? So as we talk, why is it not? I don't know why the color is not red. It should say red. The fourth one is most of the time the reason that people choose the open models, because if you take, for instance, we are assessing Gemini, right? If you take Gemini, at the moment, Google is not guaranteeing that it maintains this clinical safety and it will change controller. So every time a new version of Gemini comes, Google is not running a clinical safety, a trial to make sure, yeah, this is safe. So this is where you need to own the model. You need to own the model, control its destiny, change control it, evaluate it, make sure it's clinically safe for your use case. And the last one is about your profit margin. You have to analyze what is your profit margin, what's the inference cost, does it make sense? Because most of the times the open models are smaller, they're less expensive to run. So that should be your thinking framework to choose whether I go an API-based model that is closed box, most of the time is commercial, I pay for it, as opposed to something that I grab off the shelf, I own it, and I productionize based on that. So hopefully that's a segue to our catalog of open models, Health AI Developer Foundations, high def. This is where a lot of us are passionate about. This has been years in the making. So what we offer is we bring a lot of pre-trained models to the community. So if you can think about what they distill, to develop these things, you have to have a lot of special data set that are clean, they have gone through the pre-processing. You have to have a lot of subject matter experts to label them. You have to use a lot of compute to do the training. You have to have really advanced ML engineers to do all of that. So we distill all of that, we bring the fruit of that to the community as a starting point. Again, it's important to take it, it's a starting point. We train them, we evaluate them, we provide to the community model cards that are basically telling where they came from, how did we train them, how did we evaluate them. But this is the starting point, and you can take them, you can evaluate them for your task. The most important thing is the middle column, this one. They are customizable, that's the most important part. You can fine tune them with your data and make them best for the task that you have in mind. And we made a conscious decision not to make them Google Cloud exclusive. These are completely free. You can take them wherever your workflow is, and that is intentional because we understand in healthcare, moving a workflow from its habitat to somewhere else is always prohibitive. So we want you to take the model where your workflow is, where your data is, where your compute is, and then hopefully, if you are into the next chapter of, okay, I have 1 minute remaining. If you're into the next chapter of your work, we do integrate them in our cloud with the rest of the services. These models work the best when they're in Google Cloud, so you get a lot of pre-built engineering that you get when you come to Google Cloud. But again, this is not exclusive. So I don't have time to talk about each one of these models. At the moment, the catalog has 6 models, and I'm proud to present MedGemma to you guys, the newest, the shiniest, and the most loved model. But the catalog started with the ones at the bottom, and then also chest X-ray. We started with modality-specific encoders. Basically, if you let's say you have chest X-ray, you have a pathology image or dermatology image, or a wave sound of acoustic sounds, you could embed them. You could encode them and extract all their features so that they become tiny representation of the original data, and then you can train classifiers based on. We started the journey like that, but then we got into generative models. If you're following the open community, you've heard about Gemma. Gemma family of models are smaller models that are distilled from Gemini. Basically, you can think of them as students of Gemini model. But they are open, and they're generally smaller. We have TXGemma versus MedGemma. Each one of them is for a different thing. TXGemma is for therapeutic. It's text in, text out. You can chat about molecules. MedGemma is multimodal. You can bring medical images. It has been trained on fundus, chest X-ray, pathology. I'm forgetting one. Chest X-ray, fundus, pathology, dermatology. But it's doing phenomenally well, so you can try it with all sorts of things. If you join the roundtable, we can get deeper into it. I don't know if I have time, but in terms of the philosophy behind high def, our mission, the team behind high def, has the mission of catalyzing the adoption of human-centered AI. We do it in 2 ways. We do a lot of showing. So if you have been following, we do a lot of publications, we do a lot of prospective trials, but high def falls under the enablement part. We enable others, and then with what we talked about, we pre-train models and give them the tools. At CHIL, there's 4 of us. There's me, and there is Andrew at the back. If you can wave, there is John and Liran. You'll meet tomorrow. You can always contact us at highdef@google.com. There's a developer forum. Just a plug. Later this afternoon, there's a roundtable right there. I'll be more than happy to talk about MedGemma. There is a booth, tomorrow and Friday, we have a booth. Come see demos. We have whiteboard, and we can geek out. So that's it. Thank you. Please do take away our main site. It should include everything you need. So that's it.
Thank you so much. First, great timing having Google here, like after the release of MedGemma and all the other models, and rumors have it that facts show that the adoption has been amazing. So we're really looking forward to see what else like Google has to share. And I will open it up to questions or comments from the audience. Is there any?
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. That was great. My name is Daisy. I'm a lead biostatistician at Cleveland Clinic, which is a major healthcare system in Ohio. So my question is...
Oh, I see you now. Sure.
My question is, could you elaborate on MedGemma? Because I think you mentioned we could do some things about chest X-ray. I specifically work in orthopedics, so I'm wondering if it can be used for example, knee X-ray, and then specifically say if for image classification, what kind of task it can do. What kind of classification we can do based on that. Thank you so much.
So if you're thinking about, definitely come sit at the table, we can go deeper into it. But if you're thinking about like traditional classifier, like supervised training, we are releasing the image encoder that's inside MedJamma that you can, the easiest way to do is just bring some very little label data to it and then train a classifier based on it. It would learn to classify embeddings, not the raw images. So if that's what you're thinking, that's the most straightforward. But then you can, the MedJamma is a generative model. You can pass, you can talk to it in natural language. It has been instruction tuned, so you can bring the chest X-ray images and you can query about it. So you can query the image with natural language, and it would generate a response. So that's another way. If you just want to classify it, I would just use medical SIGLIB. That is coming soon. That's the encoder, but it could do a lot of things. It has image comprehension. It has a comprehension of the chest X-ray, so you can ask questions about it. You can do visual question answering. Like, where do you see this? Like, hopefully you can play with it, and it's very accessible. Bring your sample data, see what it can do for you.
In the interest of time, unfortunately, we cannot take more questions, but please feel free to join Fereshteh's table in the afternoon at 4:15. Thank you so much, Fereshteh. Please, a round of applause. And we will conclude the lighting talk a session today with Sunita Mohanty. Sunita Mohanty is a co-founder and CEO of Vibrant Practice, the OS for modern medical practices. She was previously a product leader in Meta, where she led teams for Oculus and AI for Meta Ray-Bans. Her work bridges the gap between cutting-edge technology and the human side of healthcare. Please join me in welcoming Sunita.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be here today and to be amongst some tremendous speakers. So I'm excited to talk to you about our journey. I'm an early stage product builder and founder, and to share with you some lessons from our journey, especially not just focused on the concept of an MVP, but a minimum lovable product. So we'll talk more about that. So today we have a tremendous amount of data that is all around us. I'm wearing a ring, a CGM, multiple things that now, consumers have more data than ever in their hands about what's happening with their health. But at the same time, we have this lack of context we have all of this data, this exhaust around us, but we're actually starving for insight around how to actually use it. And it's not just consumers who feel this way, but also clinicians. As you are looking through all of the pieces of signal of a patient in front of you, you're trying to make sense. But the potential for what we can do with this human data signal is massive. And so if you think about where we will be in the future, there's an inevitable future towards precision and personalization that we will all be experiencing in healthcare, but we're just not there yet. And my journey to building this company starts from a personal place as a patient, actually. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease in 2022, and my journey, in allopathic care was to get the recommendation of surgery as my main option for dealing with this. And I had seen my mom go through the same thing 30 years earlier, had the same option, and she actually ended up on medication her whole life. And I had seen a lot of side effects from that. So I personally was trying to find a better way to just deal with my own health. And at the time, I was also building really interesting AI products at Meta and looking at where the future of personalization is going with all that we have around us with the signals. And what blew me away was I actually found through Reddit and the internet that there was more personalized kind of data-driven medicine, root cause medicine that patients like me were finding their way back to health. And so I actually found a doctor to work with me in functional root cause care. And I was blown away because what we did was create a deeper picture of what was happening with my body with a very clear set of labs and diagnostics and other tools. And then we came up with a very personalized plan that had to do with medication for sure, but also lifestyle things I could change in what I was eating, and a bunch of other things that the doctors in the traditional system just didn't have time for me to sit with. And so through that process, I was actually able to get back to remission with my health within 8 months and avoid surgery. And I thought, if this is happening to me, this must be happening to many, many, many other people in the system. And so that's what really drove me to see that this is. It's actually a big issue. You know, people are sick of the status quo, especially when it comes to chronic conditions, things like what I was experiencing with autoimmune condition. Our system isn't currently set up to do a great job of handling these kinds of journeys in 7-minute appointments. And so not only are patients sick of the status quo, but providers are also starting to get sick of the status quo and get it feeling really burnt out in these settings. And so this is where the premise for what we're building came from, which is to help more providers practice root cause care in independent settings, and in order to get more patients this kind of root cause care. So where we actually started was thinking about our company as a managed service organization, or MSO, which for those of you who are familiar means it is a kind of umbrella organization across service delivery for, especially in our case, independent clinics. So there's companies like who have done this in the mental health space. There are companies who've done this in the nutritionist space, and it felt like there was an opportunity here to do something in the kind of functional root cause care space. And so we actually started last year by building our company around this initial hypothesis. Can we help more of these providers who we're meeting every day who want to start practices like this actually just get off the ground, ultimately get maybe things like insurer contracting and all of that. And then we started building. So as we started building, and we actually got several of these providers off the ground, we realized that there was an even more interesting problem. And both myself and my co-founder, we are technologists. We were able to learn from this process of building practices from the ground up, building independent clinics from the ground up, more about what was working and not working in the workflows, and how frustrated most of these providers were with their current workflows, because what they're doing today is really challenging. It kind of looks like this. There is just a struggle to keep up with many disconnected systems. We don't have, we're talking to small and medium-sized business owners here, like providers of maybe practices with maybe 1 to 20 providers, not massive health systems. So they don't have IT departments. They are the IT department. They're doing this themselves, and they have 6, 7 different pieces of technology that they are stitching together that don't have the latest and the greatest in terms of AI, especially that are coming to them. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, maybe I can use ChatGPT to help me with this piece, but and a scribe here, and I need to port information from here to there, and it's become very cumbersome to actually deliver this kind of forward-thinking care. So while we have this fast-growing segment of forward-thinking clinicians who are trying to create these independent practices to meet patients with this growing demand, we found that there's a really big need for just a more simple operating system that can do what they need to do, which is to deliver high data, high touch care. And so I think one really important piece of that is high touch. We're talking about care journeys here that aren't just episodic in nature, but are actually about creating long-term relationships with patients, both for chronic conditions, like I mentioned, but also for patients who are interested in prevention and sort of just having that ongoing clinical relationship with one person. The problem with a lot of systems that are available and sort of, EHRs 1.0 or 2.0 are that they were built for episodic care, and they're built, we can say patient engagement, but they don't actually have consumer grade patient engagement that you expect when you interact with an app or something else. And so that immediately drops interest and drops the ability for clinics to keep their patients engaged, keep them accountable to what tasks and information pieces that they have. And so we found that there's just really massive need, not only from people who are starting new clinics, but very large successful clinics who are operating in this space. Specifically, we've narrowed into this niche of functional, integrative, and longevity clinics, so it might be a bit different than the traditional systems that we're working, many of you might be working with. But we found that this is a really interesting, fast-growing market that is just thirsty for better technology. So that allowed us to kind of find more of a segment where now we are seeing tons of demand. We have about 800 clinics in our wait list, and we've now really created a very clear picture of what we need to build in order to capture this opportunity. So what we're building is this platform called Vibrant. It's an all-in-one platform for modern medical practices. It is an EHR, but it is also much more. So if you think about the small business owner who's stitching together their EHR, a patient engagement platform, like a messaging platform, their scribe, their billing platform, their data platform to integrate things like wearables and labs, so on and so forth, it starts to add up. We've been able to create a platform that integrates best-in-class solutions. We haven't built all of this from scratch, but we have built the workflow, both for the clinician and also the patient app experience for the patient. And so we have built this all-in-one operating system for modern medical practices. I'll show you an example of what it includes, and one of our key features today. So we launched our beta in March. We just started building the product last year. We've launched our beta in March, and the biggest, most exciting feature we have is actually a chat with chart kind of function that we've built in that our clinicians absolutely love, because it's saving them hours in their week. These clinicians, they spend a lot of time with their patients. They ask really, really long, detailed questionnaires about their family history, their birth history, all this kind of stuff that then they have to sit and they have to go through. And then they have long appointments, and then they may or may not be using a scribe yet. And then they're going and researching, what to do with these patients and coming up with very personalized plans. And so if you think about every single point in that part of the care journey, there's an opportunity for just better time spent and supercharging a clinician's capacity with the help of AI. And so where we started was two pieces. One, having this AI clinical co-pilot, so basically a chat with chart that allows you to look at any data that is in the patient's charts. We have a contained HIPAA-compliant environment with this chat built in. And then the other piece that we've built is the documentation flows. So a scribe internally kind of built into our system so that there's a closed loop within all of it. I'll show you a quick overview here. So you have a visit starting, and you're starting to pre-chart. In this case, we want to pull up information about this patient's thyroid lab diagnosis, and you don't have to provide a lot of context. You can just say, help me see the trends in this patient's thyroid labs. And it starts to both give you all the data, but then also do this layer of observation and interpretation so that you can start to more easily understand it. The second use case that our providers really love is coming up with treatment plans, or protocols. In this case, the way that we like to frame it is you should think of this as your first draft or your thought partner, and not as something that's replacing your clinical decision making. So you should always trust but verify what's coming through. One thing you'll see one thing you don't see here yet is sources. We actually have added sources, so you can actually source from PubMed, from all the publications to see where this information is coming from. We also allow our providers to, similar to building your own GPT, to add your own layer of protocols or information you want to reference so that you can reference, the AI can reference that when it's working with anybody in your clinic. So that is an example of what we've built. And when I think of our minimum lovable product. So I wanted to, I wanted to share this concept of a minimum lovable product for those of you who are not familiar with this, coming from the world of product management. We talk a lot about MVPs and trying to get to an MVP, but I think in healthcare, there's a lot of risk, right, in building MVPs, because you potentially, lose trust very quickly the minute something isn't working as it's expected to. And you also, when you lose trust, you're actually not getting good signal on whether or not what you've broadly built is working. And so, the best quote, I think this is an excellent example, is that when you're trying to test whether people like pizza, but you serve them burnt pizza and they don't like it, the only thing you know is that they don't like burnt pizza. And so it doesn't give you a good signal on that actual test that you're running. So it's really important, and coming from the perspective of building a lot of consumer products, I think about how to create a delightful experience, not just a useful one, but a delightful one, because so much of what we've learned in building for this segment of independent clinicians who are dealing with burnout, who are passionate about wanting to still keep caring, is actually winning them on emotion and winning them by, winning them over by building for a product that appeals to their emotional side. And so some of the lessons that I've learned on this path, I will share. There are just 3 that I wanted to share today. One is first and foremost, your most helpful early user, so for those of you who are just starting to think about your products or building there, making sure you pick the right early user for the fastest feedback loop, because this is so important. You might not be picking the person who is going to be the largest market or the one that you want to talk to your venture capitalists about, but it's the one who's going to have some of that signal, but honestly will be on Slack responding to you very quickly with the issues that they're running into, and able to give you that tight feedback cycle. We learned this the hard way by working with a doctor early on who was a little bit less actually several doctors who were less tech savvy, who required a lot of hand holding to even just get things like calendars connected and the right calendar invites going to the right place, and that made us focus a lot of time and energy on the wrong things rather than getting signal on the right things. So it's really important to pick fast feedback loops and optimize for that as you start to get into your beta. The other lesson we've been learning is we're building, we're not only, the way that we think about our operating system as an AI native stack is actually a collection of agents. And as Hong mentioned, there's not a lot of this yet, but this is where we're building and actively trying to create more and more of an agentic-driven product that will save our clinicians time and in their workflows. But what we're learning is coordination problems will compound when you don't have the right information being passed through, when you have lab data that's being dropped in one section and then an agent trying to leverage that and then making up data because it doesn't find that data and then bringing it back. So we have to build a great coordination layer that really understands the level of quality of each agent as we've been building these sort of mini agents that compound into the full kind of practice solution. But I think there was actually just a paper that came out about this recently, and so it's a really interesting emerging space as we all are going to be building with agents. How do you actually build for that coordination layer that actually allows for high degrees of accuracy and correctness happening through the workflows? And then I think the last piece is really, again, appealing to a sense of emotional need in this space. One of the biggest things that I've learned in building this company is actually, I think there's just a really interesting moment right now, especially in various markets that feel underserved by technology, for people to talk about how to use technology. So in this case, independent clinicians don't have beautiful big tech teams like Stanford or elsewhere. They don't have access to a lot of the best tools, and they feel like they're just kind of left in the dark of how to use AI unless they go actively figure it out. It's been really helpful for me to be a voice of and others. I think there's a handful of other clinicians who are now really emerging as great voices of how to use AI in clinical practice. We're building this sort of expertise in-house with our clinicians to share with others and building that sense of confidence. But there's also, implications for what we do within our product that are important. For example, citations, and including citations within whatever the chat with chart function comes back with, and building that sense of confidence in decision making. One of the principles we believe is really important in encouraging this, we have a human in the loop workflow, because nothing that our system creates from AI goes out to a patient right now unless a clinician has reviewed it, or has, it's all kind of considered a first draft for a clinician. But the way that we encourage clinicians to think about it is to trust but verify. And so, as across the board right now, models are still emerging, and we're still improving the level of quality. So it's really important to bring people along on that journey of understanding. And I think it's again a very exciting time to be building an AI and at this intersection of AI and health. And there's so many different layers of whether you're working for the big systems, whether you're working for small clinicians, whether you're working for building something for patients. It's a tremendously exciting time of new capabilities. And so I hope that you'll take some of these lessons from our journey, and they'll be helpful to you.
Thank you so much, Sunita, from MVPs to truly lovable tools. I think this really resonates with all the builders in the room. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, we won't be able to take any questions. So a round of applause for Sunita, and feel free to reach out to her for questions in person. And actually, my proposition for continuing will be the following. I suggest that we start right away with the roundtables. Please feel free to go grab a coffee, stretch out a little bit. And I would like to give some information regarding the roundtables. This is the most interactive part of today. And they're supposed to be small, informal group conversation, not presentations. So how it works, we'll have two sets of roundtables. It's lasting 45 minutes. We will start, you can start with one table in set 1, and then we'll pause briefly, and then you can switch to another table for set 2. And this way, we hope that you are allowed to explore a second topic and meet a new group of people in the room. So we have 4 roundtable themes: regulatory, commercial, fundraising, and technical development. And each table is led by an expert facilitator who brings their expertise in the topic. And as I said, these are not presentations, so they're open discussions, so feel free to bring your questions, share experiences, be open. And to give you some orientation in the room, the regulatory table will be here in the front to my right, and will be led by Brandon Riley. Brandon Riley is the leader of Managed Privacy and Data Security Practice, and is recognized globally for his work in privacy and cyber law, and as a top 40 under 40 top cyber and top artificial intelligence lawyer in California. A trusted go-to advisor on privacy data governance, data security, and AI issues for a sophisticated client base. Brandon is skilled at developing business-focused privacy and security frameworks aimed at maximizing data asset value and mitigating future enforcement and litigation risk. His practice spans legal and consulting disciplines, including strategic advice, regulatory compliance, transactions, government policies, security compliance and procedures, data breach responses, litigation, and government investigation and enforcement actions. The next table will be the commercial table, led by David Adashru. Dr. David Adashru is Chief Medical Officer perioperative at Cuvendus, where he leads the design and direction of the Cuvendus perioperative solution, which uses AI and automation to optimize OR utilization and drive strategic surgical growth. He trained in plastic surgery in the University of Kentucky and his MD from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and completed the postdoctoral fellowship at Stanford. Dr. Adashru also maintains a clinical practice at the University of California, San Francisco, and the commercial table will be the one in the back to my right. Moving forward, the fundraising table 3 will be at the left corner there. You can see some cards. If someone can just leave the card, thank you, on the tables, but we're using the 4 corner tables. For the fundraising table, we're having 2 leaders, Tyler Wilson and Yan Tran. Jan is a principal at South Park Commons. He previously held product management roles at early stage startups in B2B services as software, dev tooling, and fintech, including Blend as an early employee. Jan started his career on Wall Street, first as a derivatives trader and then an investor at Bridgewater. Tyler is the founder and general partner of Constellation, an early stage venture capital firm investing at the intersection of healthcare and AI. Previously, he was a product leader at Transcarent, an AI-powered care navigation company, and was a partner at Anderson Horowitz, supporting investments in and advising companies including Omada Health and Patient Pink. Tyler holds an MBA from MIT Sloan and a BS in economics from UC Davis. And finally, we will have our first technical development table over here in the front to my right, John, led by John. You met John, but you will allow me also to share like a little bit for him. So John is the Chief Data Technology Officer at Tempus AI, leading data platform and engineering teams focused on scalable, secure, and efficient systems to advance Tempus's commercial data strategy and applications. Previously, as SVP and Head of AI Apps Engineering, he oversaw product and engineering, genomics, algos, digital pathology, radiology, cardiology, and generative AI, integrating diverse data types to address disease-specific care gaps and support clinical trial enrollment. Early roles include General Manager of Radiology at Tempus, where he combined medical imaging with clinical and molecular data to support multimodal precision medicine, and CEO and co-founder CTO of Arteries, where he and his team pioneered groundbreaking AI innovations such as 4D flow MRI, cloud-native 4D rendering at the first FDA-cleared deep learning algorithm in healthcare. So it's really great having all this amazing experts for the roundtables. I suggest that you start moving around in the room, find the table that you want to start with, and if you need to stretch out and grab a cup of coffee, please feel free to do that. But we should be starting like in 5 minutes sharp. Thank you. I want to take a moment to say a genuine thank you to all of you in the room, to our speakers, roundtable experts, to every person that participated. Thank you for coming here, not just with credentials, but also with like honesty, curiosity, and generosity to share what you have learned. And you made the Unconference what it was, and thank you so much for that. And I would really like to say a special thank you to Hong and the entire CHIL team for helping to plan for this event. Thank you so much. And today was all about real talk. We talked about like the challenges, the pivots, the lessons, the sort of mission to make health AI actually work for people. And I hope this is just the beginning. So what's next? That's up to all of us. We'd love for this to become a recurrent thing, something recurrent and community-driven. So if you have any ideas, feedback, or anything to share, please reach out. We would really appreciate that. And now let's keep the momentum going. Please feel free to go outside, like enjoy some food. Drinks will be served like at the patio to your left. And again, thank you so much like for joining today, and let's keep building. Thank you.